And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Benchley Night. Welcome to Benchley Night. It is a lovely, lovely Sunday evening here. It's just been a gorgeous, gorgeous fall foliage season. It's been definitely the best, brightest leaves in years. You know, it's amazing with all the chaos going on in the rest of the country. This summer and fall in Vermont have been gorgeous. Anyway, it is a delight to be here. It's a delight to have you out there, the one of you that is watching. I think I have figured out how to get YouTube and Faceplant and my Faceplant page all playing together nicely. Not sure that anybody is aware that I'm doing this tonight, but that's okay. It's okay. It's nice to be here. If you're watching, put a note down in the comments and I'll see that, I hope. And that will be interesting, actually, because I believe that Faceplant is interacting with StreamYard and YouTube is interacting with StreamYard. But if you're commenting away on one of these platforms and I'm not seeing it, then they're not playing so nicely. But anyway, let's see. Oh, we have a bunch of people to thank. Ladies and gentlemen, because now on my Substack, which is the evolution of my mailing list, all these terms, it's so diverse. My Substack, those who pay for a subscription get a shout out at the beginning, and we got a bunch of people to thank. And of course, now my throat decides to close up on me. Go figure. We have to thank Carol Burning, Kate Fry, Rita Bruns, Ann Cousins, Lizzie Grosso, Nancy Bass, Nancy Flanagan, Christina Starkman, Busy Graham, Catherine Fisher, Nancy Radzik, Deborah Lovett, Susan McNeil, Marlon Gibson, Terry Widener, MJ Brush, Jean Fry, Helen Sixick, Sonia Jackson, James Gilbraith, Jeb Hart, Cindy Baker, John Wilhelm, Ms. Martha Rowley out there in Saxons River, Vermont. I hope you're watching, Martha Rowley. I hope you're watching. Martha Rowley in Saxons River, Vermont. And out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, probably being bombarded beyond all reason with advertisements for various political candidates, but he is easily swayed, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure his vote is going back and forth with each ad that he sees. He's like, as David Sedaris said, shall I have the chicken or shall I have the plate of excrement with bits of broken glass in it? Well, let's hope he makes the right decision, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hope he makes the right decision out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My very, very, very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter, his wonderful wife, Elise, and their little tiny dog, Ginger. Thank you all so much. Hey, Betty Sue. Oh, Betty Sue. Hi, Betty Sue. Betty Sue, ladies and gentlemen, last night, she flew yesterday from Austin to LA, and last night got to see Joni Mitchell in concert. Isn't that cool? It's like seeing one of the moderately powerful Egyptian gods in concert. Anyway, we have two readings tonight. We have Hush your mouth, cousin, says Nat. If Nat is, oh, hey, no, I'm the cousin. I'm the cousin. Oh, shocking, shocking. My very blood is rising up against me. First up tonight, Robert Benchley's The Passing of the Cow. Now, one of the things I really enjoy about doing Benchley Nights is I will go back and sometimes and research what he's actually talking about, because he was writing these in the 1920s, and whatever he was talking about is certainly, much of it has been lost to the sands of time. And that is certainly true of tonight's first reading, The Passing of the Cow. There must have been, in the research I've done, I think what he's referring to is that the Texas Longhorn was a Spanish breed of cow and of cattle, and they were less hardy than some of the Scottish breeds and English breeds that were brought over. And so I think what is the genesis for this piece is that the Longhorn population was decreasing, and these newer European breeds of cattle were becoming in primacy. The Passing of the Cow. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be very multimedia tonight, because I'm going to put slides up on the screen when we get to the pictures. You ready? The Passing of the Cow, with Wild West sketches from the author's notebook. One of the signs of the gradual deterioration of the West is the even more gradual disappearance of the cow. By cow is meant any heavy animal that lumbers along mooing, regardless of sex. There has been far too much attention paid to sex lately. According to the startling statistics of the U.S. Cow Counting Bureau, issued on Monday for release on Wednesday, there are not more than 6 or 7 real cows left in the West. This, at first blush, would seem to be an understatement when one thinks of the number of animals that look like cows that one sees from the back of the prairie schooner as one drives across the plains. But certainly the U.S. Cow Counting Bureau ought to know a cow when it sees one. These other animals must be imposters. Accepting these statistics, or that statistic, as genuine, we find ourselves confronted by a pretty serious situation. The cow has been called man's best friend. No, that's the dog. Sorry. The situation is serious, regardless of who man's best friend is. Without cows, and if, when these figures were compiled, there were only 6 or 7 left in the West, it is safe to assume that even these are gone by now. Things look pretty bleak. It sometimes seems as if it were hardly worthwhile even going on. Ever since 1847, the cow has been the feature of the West that most appealed to the imagination. Slide 1, Charles. Prior to 1847, it was thought that all these animals were horses. You can imagine the surprise of the man who first discovered otherwise. With the discovery of the cow came the cowboy. Now, this first slide, ladies and gentlemen, is a picture of horse and rider. And Mr. Benchley comments, if I were doing this over again, I would put a large cactus in to hide the horse's front legs, and maybe his hind legs too. Perhaps I'd just have the cowboy standing there. And with the discovery of the cows came the cowboy. And with the cowboy came the moving picture. So you see, it is related in an old cowboy ballad how the first cow was lassoed. It seems that Ernest Guilfoyle, known as Mr. Ernest Guilfoyle, was practicing swinging his rope one day, trying to synchronize gum chewing with rope twirling so that he could go to work on a monologue between the two and then go on the stage. He had the gum chewing and the monologue all synchronized, but was having trouble with the rope. Suddenly, after a particularly complicated session with the pesky thing, he felt a tug on the other end, and on reeling it in, discovered that he had entangled a cow in the noose. Terrified, he jumped on his pony and rode to the nearest corral, dragging the luckless cow behind him. Thus, Mr. Ernest Guilfoyle became the very first cowboy. Next slide, please, Charles. The first inkling that the world at large had of the lack of cows was the concentration of cowboys in rodeos and Wild West shows. This image here, ladies and gentlemen, shows one of the steers that has disappeared. And Mr. Benchley says, this is easily the worst drawing of the lot. It has, however, caught something of the spirit of the Old West. The first inkling that the world at large had of the lack of cows was the concentration of cowboys in rodeos and Wild West shows. Here it was possible for a dozen or so cowboys to work on one cow using the same one over and over and at each performance. But it was not until the Bureau of Cow Counting made its staggering analysis that the public finally realized what had happened. And now it is too late. Next slide, please, Charles. Here is a picture of a cowboy chasing a cow. And Mr. Benchley says, it has never been very easy for me to draw animals, and it seems to be getting harder and harder as I grow older. For instance, that cow is not right, and I know it. The horse is a little better, but seems to have too much personality. At any rate, the etching has action. Perhaps it would have been better to write an article just about cowboys themselves. But it was not until the Bureau of Cow Counting made its staggering analysis that the public finally realized what had happened. And now it is too late. Just what is to be done about it is a problem. Some suggest moving a lot of cows on from the east, but old-time Westerners feel that this would be adding insult to injury. The alternative seems to be to bring the cowboys on to where the cows are. But that would not work out either because it wouldn't, that's all. And so it comes about that the romance dies and that civilization charges ahead. But some of us are wondering, is it all worth it? And that is the end of our first reading, ladies and gentlemen. The end of our first reading. The second reading I've read before. I read before, I think, during the very early days of the pandemic. During the early days when I used to read in the kitchen. And I used to pile rolls of toilet paper in exponents behind me. So one week there'd be one roll of toilet paper. The next week there'd be 2 rolls. The week after that, there'd be 4 rolls. The week after that, there'd be 16 rolls. And the week after that, there'd be a lot of toilet paper up there, I'll tell you that. The Cooper cycle in American folk song. A study of the folk songs of and indigenous to the Ohio River Valley in just a teeny weeny section of Illinois discloses the fact that between 1840 and 9:30, coopering was the heroic occupation, and coopers the legendary heroes of local song and story. On all sides, we come across fragments of ballads, or even the ballads themselves, dealing with the romantic deeds of such characters as Chris the Cooperer or Warburton the Barrel Maker, with an occasional reference to William W. Ransom, although there is no record whatsoever of Ransom having been a cooper. The style in which these Cooper ballads were written would indicate that they were all written by members of the same family, one possibly slightly inbred. There's the same curious, stilted rhyme scheme, more really like a random idea than a scheme, and a mannerism of harmony, which indicates clearly that they were probably composed on a comb. Possibly the most famous of all these ballads in praise of coopering is the one called Ernie Hinkle, which begins as follows. Oh, my name is Ernie Hinkle. Oh, and in Rister I was born. Oh, I never let up with my coopering till I get my rental on. A rental was a special kind of thumb piece that coopers used to thumb down the hoops before the invention of the automatic hooper. Oh, one day was down in Georgia, and that I won't deny. There I met a gal named Sadie Fried, and line lost. Oh, she stole my heart completely, and that I can't deny. And 'tweren't the 10th of August or the 18th of July. Here, the singer interjects a whistling solo. When up stepped Theodore Munson, and unto me did say, oh, you can't go back on your promised word. And unto me did say, oh, I killed that Theodore Munson. And unto him did say, oh, the only gal is Henrietta Bascom, and that you can't deny. This goes on for 37 verses and then begins all over again and goes on the entire 37 verses for a second time. By this time, everyone is pretty sick of it. But there we see the Cooper ballad at its best. If you don't believe me, you ought to hear some of the others. Ernie Hinkle came to stand for the heroic Cooper. And even in later songs about baggage men, we find the Hinkle motif creeping in and creeping back out again. For example, in the famous song about Joe McGee, the baggage man, 'twas in the gay December and the snow up to your knees when number 34 pulled round the bend as pretty as you please. Lord, 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 just as pretty as you please. Now, Joe McGee was the baggage man on number 34, and he sat right down on the engine step, and he killed that Sam Bassinet. There seems to be some confusion here as to just what Sam Bassinet is meant. He must have been referring to an earlier verse, which has been lost. Now, Sam Bassinet said to me before he died, this ain't no treat to me, for the only gal is Henrietta Bascom, and on that you will agree. It seems that Henrietta Bascom was more or less of a prom girl who rotated between the Coopers and the baggage men in their social affairs, and even got as far north as Minnesota when the roads were clear. It will be seen that in all these folk songs, the picaresque element is almost entirely lacking. That is, there is very little, perhaps I mean picturesque as opposed to picaresque. In all these songs, the picturesque element is lacking. That is, there's very little color, very little movement, very little gin, please. The natives of this district were mostly rude people, constantly bumping into one another and never apologizing. And it is quite likely that they thought that these to be pretty good songs, as songs go. That they aren't is no fault of mine. You ought to know better than to read an article about American folk songs. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this week for Benchley Night. Thank you for joining us. We will not be doing a Benchley Night for the next couple of weeks because next Sunday I head out to Santa Fe, New Mexico to paint amongst the Santa Feans. And I'll be gone, I think, next week and the week after, and then I'll be back, and that'll be after the election, and then who knows? You take good care, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you on the other side. Bye-bye.